So tonight is the night when our people arrived at Mount Sinai. After weeks and weeks after they left Egypt, everyone was waiting for the day that we'll finally come to the mountain where God will give us the Torah. And the Torah says on the first day of Sivan, which is tonight, he camped at Mount Sinai. It says he in the singular, even though there were literally millions of people, of men, women, and children. But it says that he camped at the mountain because they were like one man with one heart. They were all united and all excited to receive the Torah. So although usually the Torah says when people would travel, are you sure that you packed the stroller? I told you 1,000,000 times, and all kinds of arguments happen when you travel. But when they came to receive the Torah, everybody left all their arguments behind. All the anxiety went down, and everyone united like one man with one heart. And tonight, the Torah says that it's very hard to find the date when the Torah was given. The reason why, even though there is a way, but it's not the subject of tonight, but the reason why it's so hard is because Rashi says, it says on that day they came to Mount Sinai. It doesn't even say which day. We interpret it and we know the reason why it's so hard to figure it out is because God wants to give us a message that it wasn't just that day, it's this day, it's every day, right? So today we came to Mount Sinai. We're right here, welcome. And like one man with one heart, it's fantastic. So tonight we're going to learn about one of the most fundamental parts of Judaism. I wouldn't even call it a part. It's what Judaism is all about, and how Judaism is different than all other religions, is that there's such a focus on action. Why is Judaism so action-based? In Ethics of Our Fathers, we read, study is not the main thing, action is. Why is it all about the action? There is Professor Braniver, who very successful in his field in, I just know how to pronounce it, it's magnetohydrodynamics, and I practiced a few times. And Professor Braniver is famous for his achievements in his field, but originally he started out in communist Russia. He was born in Riga, and he had a really hard time because they didn't want to accept him to university, didn't want to accept Jewish students. He has a very phenomenal biography called Return. Anyway, so one point in his life where he was invited to speak in front of hundreds of professors and researchers in his field. And he was traveling with his suitcase. In the suitcase he had this pair of tefillin, and he brought the tefillin to his hotel room, and he was planning to put on tefillin sometime during the day. But since it was such a busy day and he had to go speak, so he arrives at this lecture, and as he's about to get up to speak, he realizes, tefillin. What's he going to do? So the sun's setting, and he doesn't know what to do. On the other hand, he's thinking, how could he leave this lecture? There's hundreds of people waiting for him to give his piece about magnetohydrodynamics. So he starts with his lecture, but he's just so overwhelmed with emotion, he didn't put on tefillin today. So he just starts coughing. He says, I have a headache, I don't feel good, and he stops the lecture. He runs outside, he calls a cab, and he manages to put on tefillin right before sundown. And as he finishes putting on tefillin, he just feels so worn out that he plops down on the hotel bed, and he starts to think to himself, why? Why is tefillin so important? I mean, on the one hand, he's about to do this Kiddush Hashem, is such a wonderful thing he's going to do. It's sanctifying God's name. He, this religious man, is going to present to all of these people about his achievements and show them how even religious people are also knowledgeable about the sciences, and it's such a wonderful thing, and yet tefillin has to be done, and you can't give up the tefillin. And why is that? And that's what was bothering him. And this is really something that every thinking person encounters this kind of question. It doesn't matter in Judaism how much you believe, as much as it matters what you're doing. It doesn't matter. That's not enough just to believe in divine providence. You have a cup of seltzer, you have to say a bracha on the seltzer. It's not enough that you believe that God created the world in 6 days and rested on the 7th. To take a day off, 1 day a week, and stop working. And it's not enough just to believe that God took us out of Egypt. We have to actually eat matzah on the night of Passover. And it's not that easy. In fact, a lot of people who begin to keep Judaism, they start on the path of keeping Torah, you find this phenomena that although they start and they're excited, they stop. All of a sudden you don't notice them in synagogue anymore. At first they were so excited, but they stop. And the reason why they have this challenge of continuing, even though they were so excited at first, is because they first had this ecstasy, this feeling, this excitement, this connection with God, and then all of a sudden there's this routine that goes on over and over again, the same prayer again, the same thing again, and it's hard to continue this feeling of ecstasy into this tremendous amount of rituals. And that's why a lot of people, they start and then they slow down. And the question is, what is the meaning of all these small actions the Torah encourages us to do? And is God really so interested if you have two sets of silverware, if they have dairy and meat silverware? Is that really wouldn't it be much better if Judaism was like, go out into a field, go out into a forest and play guitar and sing love songs to God? Wouldn't that be more like holy and spiritual and meaningful? Why is it so important to do? Why is doing so important? From the perspective of Judaism, the Rebbe writes in a letter that action, the weight of Judaism that Judaism places in action is the most. Speech not so important, thought less important. And although everything you do is based upon your Voltanshang, your perspective, and your feelings motivate your actions, but most of the day, and most of the night, and most of the years of your life are about action. The question is, why is that so? Why is action so important? There's a sefer called the Kuzri. I think we mentioned a few weeks ago. The Kuzari was a sefer. There's a discussion whether this book is based upon a true story or a invented story to present a point. The story is of this king who had a dream, and his dream, God tells him, your ideals are good, but your actions aren't. And he wanted to know what God meant, and he called philosophers, and he called a Jewish rabbi, and he called other religions, and basically this book is an argument for the Jewish faith. And in one part of the book, the king is talking to this philosopher, and this man tells the king that rituals, whatever rituals you want to do in your religion, you can make them up. Make up your own rituals, he tells the king. You don't have to have any specific rituals. You can make your own. What's most important, tells the king, is to have a good heart, to purify your heart, to connect yourself to God in a spiritual way. And that's what he tells the king. That's what the philosopher tells the king. But that's not the conclusion. The king is actually impressed at the end of the story, and he converts to Judaism, and he converts his whole kingdom to Judaism. And again, there's a whole discussion, who were the Kuzarim, and did they actually convert? But anyways, but the question though is, what is so important about action? Why is action the main thing? So I want to present the virtue of action from the perspective of the upcoming holiday of Shavuos in the story of Rus and Nami. And every holiday has a feminine side. Every Jewish holiday, there's always a feminine perspective. The holiday of Purim, you have Mordechai and Esther, and even on Tisha B'Av, the day of the morning of the temple, we talk about the Jewish people in Jerusalem being like a widow. Everything in the Torah is always presented in the relationship between a husband and a wife, God being the husband, we being the wife. And in this upcoming holiday of Shavuos, we also have, it's a custom in many places to read the story of Rus. And on Chabad, we don't read it in the synagogue publicly, but we read it privately on night of Shavuos in the Tikkun. And why do we read Megillas Rus? Anybody know why we read Megillas Rus on Shavuos? Why do we read the story of Rus? Famous convert to Judaism, Rus. Why do we read about her? Anyone know? Okay. Don't everyone answer at once. Why?
Because we're all converted.
They're all converting to Judaism. I don't remember. I remember hearing that before. Yeah, on Shavuos is a time when we all convert to Judaism. We accepted the Torah. I remember such a thing. I don't know where I saw that though. I think you're right. Another reason is because who passed away on Shavuos? Who's Yartzeit of Shavuos? King David. I don't know if you noticed in Israeli politics, one Israeli politician he makes this announcement, which is unbelievable. He says, so upset, another politician, he says, they wanted to bring us back to the time of King David. I was like, wow, isn't that a good idea? Want our king to run like the time of King David. I thought that would be a great idea. But anyways, he wasn't so happy about it. He's like, that's it's so primitive. Anyways, but the reason we read about Rus is because Rus was the great-great-grandmother of King David. And at the end of the story of Rus, we actually read about the genealogy of King David. So that's one reason we read the story of Rus, because we want to highlight where King David comes from. The other explanation is because Rus had a very hard life, and she converted to Judaism with great difficulty. And the Torah wants to emphasize how you can acquire a connection to God through effort. It takes effort. As the Talmud says, if someone tells you, I have tried and not been successful, don't believe them. If someone says, I haven't been successful, although I've tried, don't believe them either. If someone tells you, I've tried and I've been successful, you could believe them. So the Torah wants us to know the story of Rus, to know that effort accomplishes something. And that although Judaism tells us on the night of Rosh Hashanah to have an apple and honey, but it's not always honey. It's not always apples and honey. Life is not apples and honey, and effort does something. That's another explanation. But I want to share the Rebbe gives a very profound explanation of the story of Rus and how it connects to the whole theme of Torah and Judaism. The story of Rus begins like this. There was a man named Elimelech, and he was very wealthy. He was living in Jerusalem, and there was a hunger. And because there was a hunger, where does everyone go when there's a hunger? They knock on the rich guy's house, and they ask him for food, and they ask him for money. And he was generous, but generosity has a point where it gets more difficult to say no than to say yes, and he was getting harassed, and he was having a hard time, and he decided he's going to move and take everyone with him and move to the land of Moab, and he did. He moved to Moab, and he moved together with his two sons and his wife. His wife's name was Nami. And when they came there, his sons married these Moabite women, Rus and Arpa, and eventually there was the wheel of fortune changed. Elimelech dies, his sons-in-law die, and his wife and her daughters-in-law decide to go back home to Israel, and they're traveling to Israel. And Nami realizes that this isn't a good idea. Her daughters-in-law have their whole life ahead of them, and going back to Israel is not going to. Why should they go back to Israel? Who do they have in Israel? She's Jewish, but they're Moabite women. Why would they want to go back to Israel? And she tries to convince them not to join her. One of them agrees. Okay, you're right. I shouldn't join you, and she turns away. Her name's Arpa, and the other one, Rus, the hero of the story, she refuses to leave. But before Rus maintains why she wants to stay, Nami entreats her again. Please, your whole life is ahead of you. Why go back home? But Rus responds with these words: don't tell me to leave you, because wherever you will go, I will go. And wherever you will sleep, I will sleep. Your nation is my nation. Your God is my God. Where you will die, I will die, and that's where I'll be buried. That's what Rus says. It sounds like a very poetic love song, and it is. It's very powerful. But Rashi gives a simple explanation of every story. Rashi gives us this mysterious Talmudic interpretation of this story. The Rashi explains this entire exchange between Rus and Nami as exchange between every convert and what the Torah says about conversion. And what the Torah says in general is supposed to discourage someone who wants to convert to Judaism. The reason it's supposed to discourage a convert is not because converting to Judaism is bad. The Talmud says that the only reason why God exiled the Jewish people among all nations is that there should be more converts, but because we want to figure out who is really sincere. So Rus was being told by Nami how hard it would be to be Jewish. First, she says, don't come with me, don't walk with me. Why shouldn't you walk with me? Because when you walk with me, when you walk together, there's laws the Torah has about walking. The Torah says that on Shabbat, you're not allowed to walk outside the city. So there's limits to how far you could walk. You sure you want to be Jewish? And she's like, whatever you walk, I'm going to walk. Then she says, well, we even have rules about where we can sleep. There's a law called yichud. Yichud means you're not allowed to be alone with a man who is not your husband. You're not allowed to be alone with him. So she says, wherever you shall sleep, I will sleep. So then she says, listen, these are just 2 laws. We have 613 laws. Are you sure you want to do this? So Ruth responds, your people are my people. Then Nami says, well, there's also idolatry. Idolatry is also a prohibition. Aren't you used to worshipping these pagan gods? And Ruth responds, your God is my God. And then Nami throws on this. Do you know that the Torah gives, there's 4 kinds of death penalties for transgressing God's will? As you are now, there's no death penalty, you're okay. But if you get into this, you're getting in trouble. So Ruth tells Nami, wherever you will die, I will die. That's the exchange. That's what happened. That's what Talmud explains this. But the Talmudic interpretation of the story leaves us with more questions than answers. First of all, okay, there is such a thing of discouraging someone who wants to convert to Judaism. There's such a thing. Fine. But why did she mention these specific 2 details? Of all the laws in the 613 laws of the Torah, she could have mentioned anything. She says, you're not supposed to go to sleep in a room, or you're not supposed to be alone with the man. Okay, there's also lots of other laws. She could have told her, we're not supposed to marry. She could have told her more central laws about marriage. She wanted to talk about marriage. She said, you're not allowed to walk outside the city on Shabbat. There's a lot of things you can't do on Shabbat. A lot of rules and laws. Why those specific laws? Question is further. Idolatry is very fundamental to Judaism. In fact, the Talmud says that when God said, I am Lord your God, that includes all the positive commandments. You should not have any other God means that you should not transgress any of other God. And so idolatry and believing in God is central to every mitzvah, is affirmation of your belief in God. And every sin is sort of like a denial of God's will. So that's so central. Why'd she mention that at the end? And I'll come at this, at the end of the whole discussion, she throws on her the death penalty. It's like, what's going on? So the Rebbe gives a genius, amazing answer, which answers the questions I mentioned and many other questions on the story. The Rebbe said that her discussion with her had to do with the exact circumstances that they were in. What was going on? Rus and Nami were walking together. The Torah says they arrived wherever they were traveling after the holiday of Passover. So they were traveling on Passover, right before Passover. So she's saying to her, hey, we're traveling now. Holiday of Passover just started. That means the laws have started. Do you know what that means? You want to be Jewish? You know what's going to happen right now? If you be Jewish, you have to do what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to have to stop middle of the road because I cannot travel past a certain distance on Shabbat, on the holiday. She says, I'm with you. Wherever you travel, I'll travel. But then she says, listen, I know where we could stay even. We can't stay at anyone's house. There's all these rules of where we could stay. You're not allowed to be alone with a man. She says, wherever you sleep, I'm going to sleep. But then she says to her much more. She says, Judaism is not just singing Hava Nagila. It's not just feeling and loving Judaism. She tells her there's 613 commandments. It's not just about feeling. There's a lot of things you got to do. So Ruth responds, wherever your people go, wherever your people are my people. I'm in it for all the mitzvot. And then she says to her, but not just about action. There's a whole ideology behind Judaism. It goes deeper than that. It's not just about the actions. And she says, your God is my God. And then she says, but you know how committed you have to be? If you don't keep these laws, there's a death penalty. So that's where Ruth gives a final response, and she says, wherever you will die, I will die. But all of this exchange doesn't answer our question. It just highlights even more how central action is to Judaism. Ruth is saying, this whole thing that Nami was telling Ruth is, you have to do mitzvahs. Mitzvahs are the most important thing. The 613 commandments, action, 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 action. But we're back to square one. Why? Why is action so important?
Because isn't it like the reason we have a body? Like otherwise we don't need one.
Okay. But why did God make us that way? There's different ways you can answer the question. I think we actually started this morning something about what you said. Maybe I'll go back to that soon. When the Rebbe had a heart attack in 1978, Dr. Weiss, very famous cardiologist in Chicago, he traveled and he was with the Rebbe's bedside day and night taking care of the Rebbe. At one point, he became a chassid Rebbe. It's amazing that everyone who became closer to the Rebbe, usually the closer you get to someone, the more you notice things that make you have less respect. Dr. Weiss became a chassid of the Rebbe, and he asked the Rebbe something was bothering him at the time. He was very famous, and he was growing in his fame and his success. And he asked the Rebbe, he's also a family man. He's married, he has a wife and children. I grew up in Massachusetts, always seeing Dr. Weiss and his family because his wife's parents lived in Massachusetts. And so every Pesach they would spend with us. And so he has a huge, Baruch Hashem, nice family. And he felt this friction between devotion to his practice and devotion to his family. And the Rebbe told him, I have the same challenge. This is what I do, the Rebbe said. What I do is, what's going on, at the end of the day, every day, my wife and I, we have a cup of tea for 20 minutes. And Dr. Weiss, the Rebbe said to him, this is important to me, as important as it is for me to put on tefillin, it's as important to me to have this cup of tea with my wife. So this is what the Rebbe was telling him, in other words. A person isn't what he feels. A person is what they do. Love can get trampled under the wheels of life. And that is that because of habits and the way things are, feelings get hidden. The only advice to keep those feelings and to keep them not just to be dominant, but to make those feelings deeper and is by bringing those feelings into your daily life. When a person starts their day every day with Moda Ani, this is how it is in marriage, and this is how it is in regards to God and Judaism as well. Start off your day with Moda Ani, and you say your brachas, and you thank Hashem, and you're constantly keeping these mitzvahs. What happens is that all of these great ideals you have become part of your life, kind of part of who you are. It's an action doesn't just make our feelings more dominant. It makes our feelings more meaningful, more real. What's more meaningful? Tell your child that you love them, or to take them to Toys R Us, shalom, for half an hour, and for half an hour to figure out what kind of toy they want. What's more meaningful? To think about how God created the world, or to stop working one day a week? Which one has more of a powerful impact in your life? Which one will stay with you more? If an army moves on its stomach, so the head stands on the feet. Our head, our feelings, our perspective of life has to do with what we do with our actions. The Sefer HaChinuch writes that every person, no matter what's going on inside their heart, if you do good things, you'll become a better person. Actions bring you to that place. Your actions make things happen. Your heart is drawn after your action. The Rebbe used this expression. It says in Torah, or the Alter Rebbe writes that by doing someone a favor one time, it causes your heart and mind to become 1,000 times more pure. And the Rebbe says literally, that means is that if it would take you 1,000 minutes to figure something out, in merit of that favor you did for someone else, that has an effect on your heart and mind, so that you would figure it out in 1 minute. What will take you naturally 1,000 minutes to figure out, it will take you 1 minute. I don't know if we could relate to this, because I don't know the last thing that I discovered after 1,000 minutes. I know something took me 10 years to figure out, which I'm embarrassed to say, but there are some things that they take people a long time. I know I still know how to do left and right, because my mother told me when I was very little. You put your hands up, whichever makes the L. That's the left hand. Anyway, so and I know righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. A couple of ways tighty, righty-tighty. You know what I'm talking about? Okay. Anyways, so there are some things in life that you only figure out from. It takes you a while, but by merit of doing something, it changes the way you think, changes the way you feel. An act of kindness goes a long way. It changes your feelings. There is a debate in the Talmud. Which verse in the Torah is the most important verse in the Torah? There's a three-way argument. One opinion is, most important verse of the Torah is, love your fellow like yourself. Bananas. Then there's Benzoma. Bananas says most important verse of the Torah is, Hear, O Israel, God is our Lord, God is one. Believe in God. And then there's Ben Pazi. Ben Pazi says the most important verse in the Torah is, get this, bring one sheep in the morning as a sacrifice to God, and bring another sheep in the evening. Why is that the most important verse in the Torah? because habit becomes natural. You do something for a while. Hebrew words. Means doing something for a while makes it your nature. That's what I'm saying. By doing something, your action has a big effect on you. That's one perspective. That's one way of answering this question. But let's go a little deeper. It's getting a little late to go a little deeper, but let's go just a little bit deeper. There's a Professor Green in Minnesota who was working for NASA, called shalom, and Professor Green wasn't religious at all, but when he was becoming more and more successful in his field, Rabbi Moshe Levin was sent by the Rebbe to Minnesota, and Rabbi Feller inspired Professor Green to start keeping kosher. Professor Green was going to take this flight, and Rabbi Feller said to him, "I know you don't keep kosher yet, fully here and there. But listen, when you're a very respected professor, you're going to be sitting in first class. Probably no one else is going to be ordering a kosher meal. I want you to order kosher meal so that the airlines will know how valuable it is to have a kosher meal. Let's do that." So he says, "Okay, fine. We'll go on a flight and order a kosher meal." He orders a kosher meal, and he's on the flight, and "Hello, Dr. Green, what would you like? I ordered the kosher meal." "I'm sorry, but there's only one kosher meal ordered in this flight, so we didn't have one. Can I offer you some ham instead? Whatever." So Professor Green is incensed. What should he do now? He's hungry. He has a long flight ahead of him. It's a stopover in Chicago. He's going on. I don't know where he's traveling, but I know it's stopped over in Chicago, and he is really upset. And you can't say, "Oh, I'll go eat something non-kosher instead." How does that look? So he just says, "No, it's okay," and he's hungry. The plane lands midnight in Chicago, and he calls up Rabbi Feller. He says, "I'm standing now in line to a hot dog stand, and I am going to order." He calls up Rabbi Feller, waking up in the middle of the night. He says, "I am so angry at you. There was no kosher food in the flight, and I am going to order 3 hot dogs. And each time I eat one bite of the hot dog, I'm going to tell God I'm eating this in honor of Rabbi Feller. How dare you tell me to order kosher meal? He's messing up my life." Anyways, Rabbi Feller says to him like this: "Dr. Green, Velvel, you always ask me what Judaism is really about. What is it really about? So I'll tell you. Judaism isn't about feelings. Judaism is about eating kosher even when it's hard. It's about being there, and the kosher food didn't come, and you're not gonna, and you stay hungry because God doesn't want you to eat the food. But it's about doing what God wants you to do. All right, I thought you were Meshuggah before. Now I know you're Meshuggah." And he hangs up on him, and he's looking at the hot dog stand. He's thinking, should he order ketchup or mustard with his hot dog? But when it gets to his turn, he can't do it. He can't do it, and he realizes this was actually a turning point in his life for his Yiddishkeit, his Judaism. There is what we like to do, what we feel to do, and then there's God's will. God, what Hashem wants. The Talmud says the reason God made the world is because God wants a home in this world. He wants us here, like a home for Him in this world. The Talmud says that before the giving of the Torah, there was a separation, there was a divide between heaven and earth. The spiritual and the physical could not connect. Spiritual heaven was in heaven, and earth was on earth. There was no way to connect it to it. The Talmud gives the following analogy to underscore the separation. King of Rome, king of Syria got into a fight. King of Rome said, no one from Rome should go down to Syria. No one from Syria should go up to Rome. And then one day the king of Rome and the king of Syria decide to annul their disagreement. The king announces everyone from Rome can go down to Syria, everyone from Syria can go up to Rome. Similarly, before the Torah was given, God says the heaven is for God, the earth is for man. There's a separation, you cannot bridge the gap. But after the giving of the Torah, it's possible to do a mitzvah. It's possible to do a mitzvah. What happens to do a mitzvah? What is a mitzvah? Is a mitzvah physical or spiritual? It's both. The first word that God said when He gave us the Torah is Anochi. What's Anochi mean? I am the Lord your God. I means the word I refers to God's essence. the Hebrew word for I, Anochi, is an acronym for Ana Nafshi Ksavis Yahavis. I, my soul, I wrote and gave. God put His essence in the Torah. Whenever a Jew does a mitzvah, what they do is they bring down God's essence into the world. They bring God's holiness into the world. There's a difference. There's something that happens to the world. The goal of creation is that Mashiach should come, is that things should change. And every mitzvah that's done doesn't just affect that particular time and space the mitzvah is done, it has a ripple effect. There is a difference between, there is doing things because we have a feeling to do them, but then there is a way Hashem meant, as you mentioned before, that God gave us a body, and God chose our body, and He decided to give the Torah to the body. Chassidic philosophy explains that the essence of our people is rooted in the essence of God, and therefore, for us, it's natural to connect. There was I think too philosophical. Make this very practical. There was a Hasidic master, I think it was Naftali of Ravshitz. He was talking with his son, and he was coughing, and his son said, "Dad, here's a tea." So he tells his son, "My son, in heaven, they don't drink tea." So his son says, "Yes, Dad, but in heaven, they don't cough either." So the point is that God put us here on earth, and we are given this unique ability because we come from God's essence, that there's no separation between heaven and earth. So that when you give someone charity, give someone tzedakah, it's not the person getting charity from you. You're getting charity from God, because your hand becomes a vehicle for God's will. You're revealing godliness, you bring God's holiness into the world whenever you give tzedakah. A mitzvah is a connection between heaven and earth. And this is what the Torah is about. It's about the coming of Mashiach and about making a change. And every time you daven, every time you learn Torah, every time you give tzedakah, it's not just you decide to do it and it's good for you to make yourself a better person, which is true too. It has an everlasting effect on the world. And until, as all the signs of the time show, that we're at the time of Mashiach, and that last mitzvah tips the scale and brings Mashiach. I just wanted to share, that was the basic point I wanted to share tonight. Before I give an advertisement, any questions, comments, criticism? Yes, go ahead.
What about the two women marrying the sons of Elimelech, that they weren't Jewish, and how, why did they say, it seems like they didn't convert before they
right,
married,
they didn't. Right.
But it's because the Torah, was it given already?
It was a mistake. They made a mistake. They were assimilated, and they weren't supposed to.
Going to go back to Israel to go back to her roots and be religious. And
her mother-in-law.
And then she was saying, "Don't come with me because I'm going to be religious, and you don't want that." And then she was saying, "I do want that."
Right. So, okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just a brief 2-minute on shabbos.
Okay. All right. So really, the whole thing we're discussing is Shavuos, the giving of the Torah. But one thing I wanted to share about Shavuos, actually I want to share two things about Shavuos. There's a blessing that we're supposed to give each other before Shavuos. The blessing is to receive the Torah with joy and inner inspiration. That's a blessing that the Rebbe used and his father-in-law used, and they're very deep words. When God gives us the Torah, so we want to not just accept it externally, okay, I'll do it, I'll honor my father and mother, okay, I'll keep Shabbos. We want to take it inside. Human nature is that when you've been disappointed, it's harder to open your heart up a second time. Someone's been disappointed in a relationship or something, it's harder to open the heart again. But there's a very powerful characteristic that God put into joy. Joy breaks boundaries. So even if someone whose heart has been, clogged up from all their life's experiences, joy has the power to unlock the whatever dust, whatever is covering in the heart. Joy has the power to let it go. So the key to receiving the Torah is to receive the Torah with joy. Once you have joy, that will already bring the inner inspiration. The second thing I wanted to share was that the Rebbe emphasized how important it is for everyone to be there. God gives the Torah. No one should be missing. In Judaism in general, it's very fascinating, this idea of the individual. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said if one person wasn't there when God gave us the Torah couldn't have been given. Imagine, God's about to give the Torah, 3 million people are there waiting to get the Torah, and all of a sudden God looks around and he's like, 1 second, Where's Waldo? I can't give the Torah without Waldo. Everyone had to be there. Because the Torah, God made each of us unique. Each of us is God's child, and therefore no such thing as one person being more important or less important. There is even I don't want to start this discussion because it'll never end, but what do you do if you're driving, and God forbid there's 4 children in front of your car, and you can't stop your car fast enough, and there's one child on the side of the street, or there's Moses on the side of the street? What do you do? Okay, fine, I just started. The bottom line is that you cannot say, I'm going to weigh the life of this individual child against the lives of the 4 children. That's not part of the equation. Whatever you're supposed to do, I won't get into, but you can't weigh that child because this is 1, this is 4. That's not how it works. Each person looked at by the Torah as each of us is God's child, and just like you can't say that with your own children, so too God looks at each of us that way, and therefore one person couldn't have been missing. So because of this, the Rebbe says that how important it is for everyone to be there on this Sunday to hear the 10 Commandments. In fact, I have a friend of mine, Shalom Al-Arar, told me the following story. I shared it last year, I don't know if you remember. He said that there was a couple he knew that had very tremendous health issues with their child, and they asked the Rebbe for a bracha, and the Rebbe said they should bring the Torah into the ICU and read the Torah in the ICU, and because since we're coming, the holiday of Shavuos is coming, so read the Torah there. And they did. They brought the Torah there, and they read the Torah, and as reading the Torah, this child who the doctors had given up on suddenly showed improvement until, thank God, completely recovered and is alive today. This being there to hear the Torah is not just a good thing for brownie points between you and God. It's something which is really powerful. You're hearing God talk to you. When you hear the Torah on Shavuos, it's not just that you're doing something you're supposed to be doing. God announced in the Talmud every year on the holiday of Shavuos, we read the Torah, I am coming once again to give the Torah. So it's brand new. It's never happened before. We don't know what date it happened because it's happening again now. It's all brand new. So if you know somebody who is not planning to come, invite them. It's a special thing. God willing, we're going to be giving out to all the children a special prize. We haven't confirmed, but hopefully we're going to send out a Facebook thing about what we're going to be giving out to all the children. And you know how easy just press share, not like, share on your Facebook. Just press share, and everyone you know is going to see it. And then more children will come. And won't that be great? More children, we have more blessings. Let Mashiach come.
Could it not be candy?
What?
Could it not be candy, the prize?
It's not going to be candy. One thing we'll be doing is giving each child putting each child in a raffle to choose which amusement park they want to go to.
Wow. And when are they going to this amusement park?
Whatever you say.
What? I have to bring them if they choose. If my son chooses one, I have to bring them?
All right, we'll let you exchange with something else if you really want.
House.